All right, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here at NARSOL. I'm really happy to be moderating this panel. I am going to introduce our two panelists, and I'm going to talk for just a few minutes, and then we're going to hear from our panelists. So, Zachary Jesse has been a Tier 3 registered citizen almost his entire adult life. He was convicted in 2004 at the age of 19. Despite this stigma, he received a full scholarship to law school, where he graduated with multiple honors. After a grueling 9-year ordeal, he was finally found to possess the requisite good moral character and fitness to practice law. He was admitted to the District of Columbia Bar earlier this year, one of only a handful of registered citizens in the entire United States to be registered as an attorney. And I just want to add that Zachary was so successful in law school that he's one of the few people who can actually tutor people for the bar because his scores were so remarkable. It's true, it's really impressive. So when Zach told me that, I was like, you have to do more with NARSOL in this movement. We need brilliant people like you. This is Dr. Shawn Rolfe. Shawn is the Director of Criminological Research at the William A. Percy Foundation for Social and Historical Studies. He leads research directions for both incarcerated and formerly incarcerated persons. Shawn has worked on a variety of topics, including prison violence and rape, unintended consequences of the sex offender registry, and residential solutions for homeless sex offenders. He's published over 15 peer-reviewed articles and numerous others in various medium outlets on these topics and others, including school bullying and sexual harassment, correctional officer misconduct, and social reentry problems for the formerly incarcerated. And we've never totally confirmed this, but we think you're the only criminologist who is also on the registry. There may be one more, but yes, so it's really important that you've sorry, I think, is this okay? All right. So it's really meaningful that you're directly impacted and you're studying these issues. So I'm really honored. So I'll also say, I put these degrees here only because this panel is about higher education, licensing, and employment. And somebody pointed out to me, not everybody knows what a JD is. That is a lawyer. So Zachary is a lawyer. And a PhD is a doctorate. Okay, so I'm just going to give a few introductory points. We're going to make this presentation available on the NARSOL website because there's a lot of useful links that may help you or your loved ones or people you know while navigating some of these issues. Okay, so one question I get a lot. I run a program at a college for formerly incarcerated men and women. I also teach in a prison. So a lot of people assume I am an expert on whether you can go to college while you're on the registry. So those programs that I run in my professional life are not specifically for people on the registry, and in fact, people on the registry can't participate in those programs due to a variety of limitations. But I'm asked all the time, and every year when I come to NARSOL, many people come up to me and they ask me, can I attend college or pursue a graduate degree while on the registry? So the answer to that is maybe. Don't hire a lawyer to help you figure this out because there really is no hard answer. Shawn and Zach will give lots of anecdotal information about how you can do this, but like everything related to the registry, it's yes and no. In New York, where I live, the public colleges and university banned the box, which means they don't ask about criminal history on college applications any longer. This was a huge celebrated move. However, if you're on the registry, there's federal and also state laws that require you to report your attendance to campus security. So even if you can apply and be accepted, there's a lot of rules regulating whether you can be on campus or not. And often it's up to individual deans and administrators It's often up to campus security. There was one case of somebody I worked with who got into the City University of New York. He's on the registry. You can find him on their website under their public safety area, but it's very hard to find. But part of the deal was that he could not walk near the gym. He could not walk near a floor. He couldn't use the gym or walk near the gym, and he couldn't take classes that were on a floor near a daycare center. Yet he was paying full tuition, yet none of these regulations are stated anywhere. It was kind of like he worked it out one-on-one with the dean and campus security. Yeah. Well, he could go to classes. He could just take classes that were roomed not near those places, and he couldn't utilize the gym or walk by the gym, so they worked that out. But again, that's not a formal regulation. He really wanted to go to school. He finally got in. And then, for example, in Texas, and I think in a few other states, you can actually go on the Texas Registry website, and you can see here, you can put in your school. So you can put in UT Austin, search. You don't even have to search by a name or any other information. You just search by school, and you get a list of people who are on the registry who attend that school. And I can't figure out exactly if, when I looked, I could only find students, but I did hear from somebody who works in these schools, but you will be marked or stigmatized in some way or subject to special regulations. The Ban the Box movement has been really successful. The Common Application, which is the application you can use to apply to many, many schools, no longer asks about criminal history. But again, individual schools have the right to ask supplemental questions. So many schools do that, and they do ask about criminal history. Or if they don't, they just ask about violent or sex offense convictions. So in general, things are getting better if you have some other kind of criminal conviction, but it's very complicated for those on registries. There's also a federal law called the Clery Act, which initially was passed so that colleges would report sex crimes on their campuses. It came out of this growing concern that women on college campuses were being victims of sexual assault, and the colleges were hiding this to ruin their reputation. But somehow this act has been changed and adapted, and now it's very hard to figure it out, but it does say there's this annual security report that every college that's accredited has to put on their website, and it has to include information about sex offenders, and then another part of it says it has to have information regarding sex offenses. So many schools just list people who are on the registry on their campus under that list, even though it was intended to help women who are being victimized on campus and show sort of statistics and frequency of those crimes, but somehow it's now been warped to just list people who have prior sexual offense convictions. Finally, there's a number of really good links, and I put them here. The best one and the most recent one is from the National Council of State Legislatures, and that brief includes all the most recent laws in every state, as well as the federal laws regarding attendance on college campuses. Okay, but now you're going to learn the real story on all this. We're going to hear from Shawn and Zach and how they attended college. They both attended college while on the registry as well as professional school, and how they navigated that and how they overcame those challenges. So why don't we go in alphabetical order? Zach, my last name.
Z is at the end.
Z is at the end, but J is before.
I got a mic. I don't need to move at all.
Oh, okay. All right. So
I'll watch.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Is this gonna be a call and response where you ask the sort of specific questions?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Zach, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So as you alluded to, I was convicted in 2004 when I was 19. So I've been on the registry basically my whole life. I was in college at the time, and I wasn't expelled, but I was sort of strongly requested to leave after the fallout for what led to my conviction. I was able to transfer to another undergraduate press the silver button. All right, great. Sorry, I'm doing this off the cuff. I apologize. And I have to say, at the time, getting my undergraduate degree really was not an issue. Everyone in my class knew of my conviction, and I think it was part, the zeitgeist at the time, and it just really wasn't as much of a concern, both for the students that I was dealing with, as well as the faculty, because during my whole undergraduate career, it really didn't pose any sort of problem or come up at all. But that's not, I think, what we're here to talk about. Once I got to law school, and I might be jumping ahead here, apologies, Emily, but I applied to law school thinking, well, I've got to do something more proactive with my life. It would be rather poetic of me to pursue a law degree given my stigma and the fact that I wanted, make a change in the world for the better for folks who are suffering like I am. And so I applied to law school and talked about my my conviction and the facts that led to it and what I want to do, moving forward. And to be perfectly frank, I think talking about my conviction in my application was what led me to not only get accepted, but to get the scholarship that Emily had talked about. Because I think they saw it as very much like oh yeah, this guy, this is a very poetic thing. But it did prove to be a little bit of a hassle even at that early stage, because I basically had to write a very detailed account of what had transpired and what happened afterwards and whether I'd gotten into any trouble. This was before even being accepted to college or accepted to law school. And then during law school, there was no shortage of hurdles and frustrations that came about directly as a result of the fact that I had this sex offense stigma. Do you want me to keep talking about that now, or do you want me to turn it over to Shawn?
You can go on a little bit more.
Sure.
About what happened in law school.
Sure. So it became quickly a problem because I had gotten this scholarship. A lot of students were a little frustrated about that. The student paper ran numerous articles about me and the fact that I had gotten this. The school, I know this because I had lunch with the former dean of admissions. She told me that my admission sort of caused a schism in the school, and they had to make a not on the books rule, but sort of a ad hoc rule that no more sex offense convictions at all would ever be admitted to the school. So, for what it's worth, I feel like I was very lucky in being admitted. I don't know if that'll change in the future, and I certainly hope it does. But for whatever it's worth, I got in the door and hoping to, use my powers for good. I've got to say that I think maybe I'll leave this for another question. But after, I graduated near the top of my class, did very well, passed the Virginia bar, but to get a law license, you need to pass the bar and also be found to have the requisite character and fitness to practice law. It's called a character and fitness hearing. For most people, it's not even held because they don't have anything in their background that's a problem. For me, I had a year-long set of hearings to sort of determine whether I was of the requisite character and fitness. It culminated in the recommendation that I did have the character and fitness hearing, character and fitness to practice law. And then, but unfortunately in Virginia, there's a final arbiter who, for felony convictions in particular, can overturn that decision. And they did that in my case after about a year and a half of waiting. And then fast forward several years, I decided to try my hand at it again, applied for law school, or applied for the bar in District of Columbia, and had to wait for 4 years to get a decision for the character and fitness hearing. But finally was found, along with Guy Hamilton Smith, who I don't know if is here right now, but he's here today. And so, right now, at least there's 2 sex offenders who have sex offense convictions who are licensed attorneys in the District of Columbia. So I'll leave it for right now.
I just want to add that while you were not able to pass the bar and become an attorney, you were allowed to tutor people.
Yeah. So I when I did I passed the DC bar with an extremely high score, and I sent it to a bar review company. I was like, hey, any chance I could get a job with you with this score? And they said yes. And so in the period of time where I was not a licensed attorney, I at least had the opportunity to do law by sort of ironically tutoring other people to become attorneys. So, I mean, the good news is that I kept up with everything. You know, I got the black letter law down. So.
Do you want to sit or stand? So.
Oh, I'm going to stand.
So, Shawn, why don't you tell us why you decided to pursue higher education while on the registry?
Well, for me, I was convicted in 2002, and so when I was in prison, I remember going through the sex offender treatment program, and I was on the phone with my dad, and I said, you know, I think I can do some good here when I get out and help other people like myself. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think maybe going back to school and going all the way up through and getting a PhD and doing research, because that's what I love to do. And so I ended up actually doing that. Now, the journey along the way was kind of difficult because being on parole and trying to go to college is pretty tough. And there's a lot of extra hoops you got to go through. When I applied to my local university back in Ohio at Wright State University, they did ask if you had a felony conviction. And so I had to write a whole long letter, have my parole officer write a letter, and so forth. But I'll never forget, you know, usually when you apply to a university, you get like a nice big envelope, which means you got in, it's got all the good stuff. Well, mine was a small one, which usually means it's a rejection letter. And for me, it was not a rejection letter. It was actually saying I was actually conditionally accepted into the university, so long as I didn't go to the child care area or on student housing. So if you're definitely on the registry, there's definitely going to be places where you can and cannot be. There's also the federal law where you have to make sure that you register your school address, as we talked about earlier. And then at that time, the university had their own registry on their own website. And then until that got overturned, someone challenged it saying, no, you just need to give them the information of where to go look for it. Don't be blasted all over your school website. So undergrad for me was not too bad. Only a couple of my professors knew because I was working with them and did a senior honors thesis that was published on like basically like the economic impacts of being on the registry. So like if you're getting food stamps and public housing assistance, which you can't get usually because of Section 8 doesn't allow people on the registry, especially Tier 3. So from there, I decided to apply to, so learning my lesson a little bit about, okay, do I want to go through that heartache again of like explaining everything and stuff like that? I actually looked at graduate schools that were in a program that I wanted to be in that didn't ask those type of questions. And I didn't talk about my conviction or anything like that when I applied. I just talked about the things that I was looking at and researching. And I got a full ride to go to the University of Louisville for my master's and my PhD from them. So now also as a combat vet, I also was able to take advantage of the VA programs too, which also helped me pay to go to school as well with a stipend and so forth. And those are things that I'd be more than happy to talk about more. But I would say without those two things, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I've done. And the other thing too was I was actually fortunate why I went to the University of Louisville is because people might know, at least some attorneys or other researchers, is that my mentor was Richard Tewksbury, who is one of the godfathers of sex offender research, along with a couple other people. So I at least got to get trained very well from someone that has broke ground in this research area and so forth. And then a few other things. What I love about the research that I've done is, I think it's great that other attorneys and also people like Zach are fighting the law for people like us. But I like the fact that I get to do the research that helps give them something to actually talk about and show proof in the pudding. And I can honestly say that the best reward to me is that 2 of my research studies that I have done have been cited and highlighted in amicus briefs before the U.S. Supreme Court. So. And I think the last thing with going into higher education and so forth is that you can't be naive to the fact that people are not going to not find out when they do. How you need to go in with the game plan and be prepared. When you make some good connections with some of your professors, you want to make sure that you keep those relations up, because they're going to be your biggest advocates to help you through the situation if something comes up at all. So, and then on the professional side, that's a whole other story. Do you want me to continue with that, or?
No, I think, yeah, I'll just do the next slide and then
Okay.
we'll each talk about what it was like navigating.
That was way harder than going to school.
Yeah, so it's just one more slide. And I also want to say one of Shawn's articles on travel is one of the most highly cited scholarly articles on the subject, because there aren't that many articles on the subject of travel, which is very important to those on the registry, but in the broader community, it's not that important, which is why it's really important to have directly impacted people studying this and being part of the scholarly conversations. Okay, so the second part is, let's say you go to school and let's say you get a degree. What is it like in the workplace and getting licensed? So just as there are confusing and contradictory restrictions and barriers to education, there are similar hurdles to employment. So this, as I said, will be on the website. This, I included a link here to the Fair Chance Act fact sheet, if any of you are familiar with it. It's very long, but it's very, very useful. And it's in this presentation, which will be available following this presentation. And there's a link to that act where you can see for every single profession what the rules are regarding employment for people with criminal legal histories. However, for people on the registry, it's far more confusing. Another really good resource is the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences of Conviction, and that has a database. It's by state and by employment type, and that includes information about licensing and all the rules, the federal and state laws. You can look at it by state, you can look at it federally regarding rules, as well as the Fair Chance Licensing Project. They're both linked here, and again, I'll post it. However, you'll find a lot of contradictory information. For example, in California, where they have a really, really good law regarding ban the box, where you can't ask people for criminal histories on hiring applications, and you can't take away, in theory, you can't remove a job if somebody is qualified and they're accepted, and then you find out they have a criminal history. However, for people on the registry, there's lots of ways around this. Employers can make arguments that children are nearby, or that they're vulnerable populations, or that others in the workplace have had experiences of trauma and simply being around somebody with a conviction. So I'm not familiar with any legal recourse that you can have if you violate fair chance hiring practices for people on the registry. But Shawn and Zach can both tell you in detail that once you get your degrees and you get licensed and you get on the bar, hurdles remain, and I'd like them both to tell us a little bit about those hurdles and how they navigated those. Shawn, why don't you start, and maybe you can start with that first job you got when you got your PhD.
All right, so people ask me all the time, would you get your PhD again? I say no, because it is very grueling to get. However, I thought, okay, I've made it. I've done all this. I've been off parole for a long time, been married for over a decade, so now I'm like, okay, now everything's going to start coming together for my life. So I applied to lots of places, had lots of interviews. And of course, you don't know if people are Googling your name or not, but, make it to the second interview, third interview. So I finally did get my first job offer at a Jesuit university, to not be named. And so basically one of the secretaries or assistants to the director of the research center there Googled my name and then brought it up, and word spread like wildfire in the research center of like over 40 people who literally hire people convicted of offenses on parole to help collect data themselves for their projects and stuff. They even had an entire staff meeting with all 50 of them to sit there and talk about me and if I should be there or not, and should they have a special hotline with HR and this and that. And then it came out that other people had been sexual harassment in the workplace and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not even there. It has nothing to do with me, But so then I had to provide a whole background about myself, all my certificates of all the things I've completed. And I'm talking about for on the sex offender, treatment stuff and parole paperwork. And so it was about a 40-page packet that went to HR. Then it went to their attorneys. Then they had a meeting with the provost and their attorneys and the director. And then they came back and rescinded their offer to me. So that was experience number one. That's actually happened to me 5 times. So until I got my job now. And with this particular job, they didn't ask for anything like that. They didn't care. They're like, we want someone that's just as involved. We do a lot of research on this type of topic. So please, will you come to us? Will you help us? And I'm like, okay, I will, for sure. And that has actually kind of led to, and Emily I don't think I had a chance to tell her this, but I actually also work for Boston University School of Medicine as a researcher for them on a particular project in California prisons, where I go into the prisons. Shocker, I can get clearance to go into a prison to actually interview veterans that are actually going through a program there. And so I go into San Quentin prison and also Soledad to actually interview inmates and so forth for this project. So actually I have 2 jobs, which is, I never really thought that would happen, but the foundation was gracious enough to lend me out for a couple years as a part-time consultant or not consultant, I'm actually work for Boston University. So I had to do the same thing with them. Give them all this big packet. Thankfully, I've written it a few times, so I just had to update it. And I actually went through and was hired. So that was a success story. So I don't know if that has something to do with I already had a job, but I know it's important that once you have a job, hopefully it might be easier to get a second job. So.
Do you want to talk about how you did get that first job?
Oh yeah, so that is interesting. So gone to plenty of conferences and so forth, and actually Emily was at the Assoc online during COVID, and the director of the foundation was actually listening to her talk about her new book that came out last year, which I'm in. I'm the PhD guy that's having a hard time getting a job, and so they asked her if they can contact me, and that's how I got the job, was through actually the organizations like this. So it does help.
Okay, so you want to go?
You get to go. I don't want to.
And then there's
Just to correct one minor thing you'd said earlier, I'm not currently working on any sex offense related cases. I was doing some work. I was doing some work a little bit earlier this year, or I guess last year at this point in time. But I'll lead up to this, but I actually got a job offer that was very good. But I want to culminate with that because I think that is kind of an outlier. I want to echo something that Shawn said at the start, where he said, would he do it again? And I'm very lucky with where I am right now. I do not know if I would do it again, just because even the fact that I got to do it with a scholarship, got to do it at a point in time where maybe I got in before the door was even closed. It has been such an uphill battle that I'm not even sure if it's worth it, to be perfectly frank at times. But I don't want to say that to dissuade people from pursuing higher education if they want to. I just want to make it clear that pursuing higher education is a hurdle in and of itself, and it is made monumentally more difficult when you have to deal with essentially what feels like so many more hurdles and very vocal people constantly trying to bring you down. That having been said, I don't even remember what the original question was.
Your job experience, huh?
yes.
Oh,
So tell us
okay.
about all the
Yeah. Yeah. So I also want to echo something Shawn said. I won't belabor the point, but I've had numerous jobs where I have been offered the job, even with the managing partner knowing full well about my conviction, and then having the job offer rescinded literally sometimes as I'm showing up to the office for the first day, because the firm had a meeting about me and then someone got upset about it. That has happened so many times, I cannot count. And for a while, I kind of threw up my hands in frustration. Was like, well, I'll just do something else. I'll come back to how I've approached applying for jobs in a second. I want to talk about something that might be a topic of another question that Emily will ask, but it's on my mind right now. So here we go. there are a number of jobs, sort of alternate career paths out there. So, for example, for me, one thing I considered was doing Social Security disability work, because that is a thing that often requires a law degree, but it does not in fact require a law degree. So most of these things are handled by attorneys. So I thought, oh, this is perfect. Don't need a license. I could do this. And I almost really went down a unfortunate rabbit hole before figuring out that while you don't have to be an attorney, you cannot be a felon. So it was a little frustrating, but the point I'm trying to make is one of the biggest things I want you to take away from is, if you want to do this, make sure that the field that you're going into doesn't have some sort of statutory preclusion against you being in that field. Nothing is worse than working hard, earning that degree, and figuring out you cannot even do what you want to do. A lot of times these vary state from state, so it's not going to be like a forever thing. Maybe you could transfer to another state and do it, but it would be downright tragic to get a degree, spend all that time and money, and then figure out you can't even do what you want to do. I have had the fortune of having a couple good jobs in the legal career even before I got my license. And the one thing I'm not quite sure about now is whether or not and to what extent to bring up the conviction during the hiring process. I used to think, and maybe this is because of how beneficial it was for me to do when I was applying to law schools, but I used to think, I'm going to bring this up right at the outset every single time. I don't want to be put in a position where it's found out later and then that causes a problem. And so, I would usually tell the managing partner right at the outset. And I feel like I'm slowly backing away from that, just because it's a lot easier to ask for permission at times than it is, or for forgiveness than it is for permission. The job I have with the bar tutoring company, they just asked about whether I had a felony, and I said yes, and then it was never asked about again. That's not quite true. I had a more detailed conversation with my immediate boss, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I Googled you, I know, and I don't think it's a big deal." But I worry that if I had brought it up at that initial stage, it would have been passed up to HR, and then that would have been summarily thrown in the garbage can. And one of the, I guess, main points I think I'm trying to make here is that people are, individuals have a much easier time seeing us as, people, and giving us grace and knowing that, everyone makes mistakes and stuff like that. But once you get into a larger group, it becomes much more of a putting you in a box. And at that point, the stigma really stands out. So for whatever it's worth, I would let people know, insofar as you don't want it to come back and bite you, but don't do it in a way that sort of encourages the information that you're on the sex offender registry to be passed up to HR. There are tactful ways to bring it up in the process without, sounding alarms that maybe get you, kicked out. But the jobs that I will say have, every single job that I've gotten, except for my most recent one, has been through networking. And by networking is all sorts of things. But, one of the longer jobs that I had at a law firm was just because my friend happened to work there. He's like, "Hey, we are hiring. Do you want a job as a paralegal plus?" And I said, "Sure, let me try it." And it was the worst boss I'd ever worked for. But the point I'm trying to make is we are in a unique position where it is going to be hard to get jobs by going on Indeed and going through monster.com. And it is much easier to get jobs through navigating the social relationships because, like I said before, it's easier for someone to vouch for you. And if you have that person, if you have a person who can see you as an individual, he can show that you are, not as bad as what your record reflects. And that's what you need to do in order to, get those positions, especially if they're, require more sensitive things like, being an attorney.
I'm just going to put one more slide up here. What? Oh, sorry. Which are the key takeaways. I'm really glad Zach just ended by saying networks are very, very important given the conflicting and terrible information online and the nature of the laws and regulations regarding these issues, which don't really apply to people on the registry. We'd like to take some questions from the audience as well, but just to be clear, don't hire a lawyer to help you navigate these things. Use networks. I don't want to sound like QAnon, but do your own research. There are no lawyers that seem to be able to help with these matters, especially in terms of going to law school, graduate school, and college, because they operate all as rogue entities, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. I mean, it's great to hire a lawyer if you can afford one, and it's just that in the people that I've worked with over the past few years dealing with this haven't had any luck because the law itself is so ambiguous. And then here's our contact information. One thing that I'm putting together is a survey and database about schools and employers that do hire specifically people on the registry. There's a lot of information about places that hire people with conviction histories, but I'm trying to create one that specifically looks at those on registries. So if you want, you can email me and I can send you that survey. Here's our contact information. I'll leave this up there. And then we'd like to take questions from the audience. Thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
All right, so both of you, all, thank you. Not all, just you guys.
No, the microphone's on.
Hello.
It's just not feeding.
Okay, we can hear you.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah,
Maybe you can try that one.
go ahead.
I'll go louder.
All right, there you go.
So, thank you guys, thank you all, but thank you for your stories and sharing that. And, a couple thoughts as you're talking. You both have the opportunity to kind of be ambassadors for the movement and be out there and say, look, I'm doing this and I'm doing great work despite the past and making things better. Do you feel that you're able to do that? I mean, you're here talking with this group and you're going to be totally open and honest, but you also don't want to put your careers in jeopardy as you're doing that. How open can you be? Because I think that that's something that, it takes people really going out there and proving how valuable you can be. I mean, you guys are incredible. The fact that you have accomplished what you've been able to accomplish despite all the obstacles, it just says that you've really gone so far above and beyond. If I had a job, I'd hire you both, right? So, if I had an opportunity, I'd hire you both. So, that's my question is like, how open do you feel that you can be as ambassadors for the movement?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I guess for the live stream, he asked, how open do you feel you can be as ambassadors for the movement? I feel it really depends on the situation. I'm not going to walk down the street with a sign that says, I'm on the sex offender registry, asking a question. But I do think there is, I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but there is a little bit of mental strain if you're always constantly worrying about if people know you have this conviction or not. And conversely, there is a lot of, you can let all that go once people know that you, like, once people know this information about you, you don't have to worry about like whether or not they'll judge you differently or not. That they are judging you as they are right now, even with that information. And so I guess to get to your point, I think it's very helpful to, there's a legal principle, not legal principle, there is a saying in the legal world where you want to avoid any appearance of impropriety. So I try to live my life by that, where even if I know something is not illegal per se, I will avoid doing that so that it doesn't reflect poorly on me as a person, or more broadly on sex offenders generally. I don't know if I can give a good example off the top of my head, but that's just one thing I try to live my life by, so that, I want people, when they find out that I am on the registry, to go, okay, Zach's a good guy. I wonder what other good guys are on the registry. This is I don't think, well, I appreciate it. And I don't know if this is exactly to your point or not, but one thing, this is sort of relates to an earlier point that I wanted to make, and I'm going to tie them together. The firm that I worked at previously for a long time was a very small firm. It was 6 people big. I think at the biggest it was 10 people big, and everyone knew of my conviction. It was brought up when I got hired, and when people were brought on board, they were usually told, so that it wasn't a surprise to them. And I think if you are going to endeavor to look for positions, it's wiser to look for smaller organizations like that, because you don't have to convince so many people. I know this is very tangential to what you're talking about, but it kind of inspired this comment, which is like, you want to put yourself out as an advocate, and the only way to do that is to make your conviction known. And it is easier to survive in the workplace with having your conviction known if it is a smaller group of people that you have to convince that you're a good guy. I assume that makes sense, but I'm sitting down anyway, so.
So I agree with a lot of things that Zach said. For myself, to me, it's kind of like where I'm filling you out, and then can I trust you? Because honestly, I'm giving you something that weaponizes, and you can hurt me in many different ways. So I fill you out, and then I'll make that decision based upon that. But at the same time, though, people are going to know when they're going to know, and so forth. But the other thing I didn't get to mention, I forgot to say, is that in this journey of going and getting my PhD and so forth, I actually chose to stay on the registry, because if I stayed in Ohio, I couldn't have been off the registry in 2014. And so after that, I've had to go where the jobs are at. So that's what brought me out to California and so forth. So it's been taxing. And hopefully someday I'll be off here the next year in California once they figure out what tier I am, which should be tier 1 like every other state I've been in. But so basically it's just about, doing your due diligence and just making sure that you can trust the people that you do tell, but also building those relationships that can help you, navigate it with other people.
Hello. You mentioned the importance of networking to develop yourselves professionally, because many of the traditional means of career development may not be as accessible to you. And I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to network effectively for employment and professional development with these kinds of criminal histories and the obligations of being on the registry.
Right. So for me, being a criminologist, going to professional conferences, presenting some of my works and things like that, is how it's the best way for me to have a nice network. It's how I met, Emily and some other people from a lot of different things in that arena. So in a traditional sense, I'm not really sure, other than if you were to, you just got to, once you meet someone, then you meet another person, it just kind of becomes like a chain. But for me, it was going through to a professional network, development, careers, and conferences, and presenting my research is how I was able to develop a network.
I don't know if I have any very solid advice to answer that question, other than you just have to try to make inroads with people rather than being a huge jerk. I say that in jest, but and don't look at people transactionally, like, what can I get out of this person? But it's very easy to do that. I think maybe for some. I am very bad at networking. I will say that at the outset. and all of my networking successes have been more or less accidental. So I'm probably not the best person to give advice in this regard, but I think Shawn's advice of get out there, meet people, say hello, spend $40 on some business cards and hand them out. There's small things. I keep no social media presence because I don't think I want that in my life anymore. But social media, I think if your state allows it, which I think all of them do because of Packingham. What am I talking about? I think social media is a good way to find people who are in similar situations. The groups in this room, Florida Action Committee, this is a great way to meet people, and maybe they have opportunities. Maybe they know someone that knows someone that needs to hire a guy and they can vouch for you, right? Like, networking doesn't require some magic formula where you have to do X correctly. It's just about meeting people, trying to find inroads with them, and then seizing on opportunities if they ever come up, or letting your needs be known. One of the things about networking is, like, you have to put your needs out there. You're not going to have someone randomly say, hey, do you need a job? Because I have one. You have to tell your network, I need a job. And then, someone, maybe a friend of a friend, is like, oh yeah, so-and-so says you're a good worker, so I've got a spot for you. He mentioned your background. Don't worry about it. That's the biggest piece of advice that I would give.
Oh, there you go. Okay. I'm speaking from someone that's going through the process right now. 3 years ago, I was a legal clerk on a prison yard in California. When I got out, I have 2 grad degrees. I nothing illegal whatsoever, but I decided to pursue a law degree at 64 years old, and I said, I can't do that. So I actually decided to go after a paralegal. So right now I'm in the process of University of California getting my paralegal certification, AB certification. And I'm actually starting my courses in ethics and civil litigation. My summer quarter starts next week, Monday evening. But the comment I want to make a couple of things. One is Dr. Horowitz had mentioned pretty much enrolling on universities, but online courses also you have to do specific. I know in California, I had to last week register with the local police department and campus police department, even though all my classes are online. And then 5 days before the end of the quarter, I have to contact the campus police department and my local police department that courses are finished. Next quarter, I have to go through the same steps, and there hasn't been a problem with it, but it is. And I do agree with networking. I know a lot of attorneys in San Diego County where I live, and that's helped me out because I think I can get a part-time job even as an old man doing something, especially with legal aid. My question pertains to this. I actually applied at a private university at first. They didn't accept me because I was on the registry. And I contacted Janice Belushi, and she said, go to a state university. I did. I didn't have any problems with them. And I know Dr. Horowitz is connected to a private university. But my question is, do you see a difference between a public and a private entity, university or school, as far as accepting you and going through the education with someone on the registry?
Public schools on the surface are easier because they're protected by federal and state laws. But then I've talked to a lot of people. Private universities have fewer regulations, so you can kind of negotiate things with a dean or security there, whereas public and private universities have to report everything to the federal government in different ways. So it just depends. Public, usually the first phase is easier. But online, it's interesting because there are regulations for even attending school online. Shawn, you didn't share this, but you were going to teach a course online, and it got rescinded, the offer, because of his conviction, even though he was only going to teach the course online and not even be in the same state. So yeah, some private schools have been much better because you can kind of go under the wire, and they have less. And they don't, in states like Louisiana, where they receive a lot of money from conservative lawmakers, there's been a lot of fights about people with criminal convictions being on college campuses. So Sorry, yeah, again, answer is maybe.
Case by case.
Yeah, case by case.
If I could continue online, my question was, we hear all these ads, University of Maryland, Pittsburgh, Phoenix, online. Is there any difference? Shouldn't it be easier if you're not going to be interacting with the campus daycare center?
City of New York, who after like 10 years was able to get in, they told him you can take classes online, and he said, I don't want to, I want to take classes in person, I don't want to do that. So it does seem like there are more opportunities online, but like he said, he tried to apply somewhere online and it didn't work. I would imagine those schools just want your money, so I cannot imagine that some of those, I mean, especially, I don't think for-profit schools would care at all, like University of Phoenix, but
I'm going to add something to that.
yeah.
So when I was going to teach that course online, I was in a different state. And so teaching and taking classes, you still have to register, right, with your local police where you're at. But you also need to make sure, and this is what's interesting, because nobody knows the laws anywhere. It doesn't matter who you talk to, but I talked to the chief of police at the university. I don't know if you have to register or not. Well, I said, well, I'm not coming all the way from California halfway across the country to register. And then I called the Attorney General's office. They told me, oh, yes, you do have to. But then when the chief of police called the Attorney General's office, oh, no, he doesn't have to. So what I'm trying to say is that they don't know what they're doing. It's just, I'm trying to make sure I'm checking all the boxes, dotting the I's, cross my T's, because I don't need some stupid, arrest for something like that. But just to let you know, you need to do your due diligence to take care of yourself and protect yourself. And also, most attorneys didn't know the answers either. I called 5 of them, so.
That's why I said my first point was don't hire an attorney for this. Nobody knows.
If you can know how to pick up the
Except
phone, I
Zach.
can do the same thing.
I don't know at all. I know nothing.
So,
And, oh, sorry.
I applied to a bunch of law schools. I had 157 on my LSATs, but maybe not the best undergrad GPA. But I was on probation at the time, and so they all said no. I got off of probation recently, and I'm wondering if things would be different because of that, if the reporting changes, or if there's any advice to getting past this gate.
Sure, I'll take this one. So I will say, in terms of whether it is different because you are on probation from your perspective, I think that it is hugely different. I don't know which state you're from, but at least in Virginia, it is the Wild West if you're on probation. You can have just about whatever restrictions your PO wants to give you. Whereas after you get off probation, what you have to do is codified into law. From the school's perspective, I don't know if that would be a huge, if that's the dispositive thing that would change their mind. I would think that it would be a pretty important thing. I mean, from an optics standpoint, there's a pretty big difference from this is a guy who has, done not only done his time, but he's off parole. He hasn't reoffended, blah, blah, blah. We feel comfortable giving him an opportunity here at this school versus this is a guy who committed a crime and he's also still on probation, so we're not quite sure whether he's going to reoffend or not. This is not a judgment on you, obviously, but this is just like that. I think what the public sees probation as is like, the trial period for being a, normal person again. So I can't say for sure whether or not it will be a important distinction from the law school's perspective, but I think it probably is. Whether or not that means a law school that previously denied you would change their mind, I can't say. But I also don't think it would, as long as you're comfortable paying the reapplication fee or whatever it takes. I don't think it would hurt to reapply and say like, when I previously applied, blah blah blah. It's been X years since then. I'm off probation now, and I wonder if you'd want to give me a second opportunity. If you want to talk to me afterwards, happy to do that too.
Should we take one more from Ann?
Yes, for those of us who have loved ones with really long sentences, I don't know how long your sentences were, and I don't know how long you've been out, but our son he already has his master's. He does LSATs for fun, and He finished the paralegal correspondence course because that was the only thing I could find that was by correspondence. So what suggestions do you have for somebody to do in the meantime of all the years that are upcoming?
So while they're in, yeah, sorry. So while they're still in prison, I don't know if I can answer that just because I didn't do anything like that while I was incarcerated. So, Shawn, if you have any advice here.
No, as I say, I was only in for 2 years, but I did not do anything like that when I was in myself. But I can say that Ohio University does have a very good correspondence program that does have graduate degrees, but they're only master's level. But as far as like trying to do a PhD or a law degree inside prison, I think it would have to be one of those prisons that actually would offer, and I have not heard of anyone doing that. So, I don't think they want you to come out much better than when you were when you went in, to be honest.
All right, should we, do we have another minute?
Yeah, we have to 11:45.
Oh, I thought it was 11:30. Okay, sorry, so
Going.
you,
Just to respond back,
Oh,
so
sorry.
on my side, to that question.
So my son is incarcerated in Florida, and he'll be there for 8 years. He's done half his time already. Same situation. He has a JD degree. He has a master's degree. What's he going to do to keep his mind active and to be able to continue to contribute to society? Adams State University provides written courses as well as online courses, so he went for an MBA.
Go ahead.
And so my question has got to do with two areas, and blessingly, you just answered one of my questions. I just want to know if anybody in the room knows what areas of study would you avoid if you're incarcerated? And secondly, what areas of employment would you think are easier, quote unquote, to get licensed? And the background for this question is my nephew is in Danbury Federal Prison. He's halfway through his 8 years of sentence, and he just signed up with Adams State. I'm at the point where I'm really worrying that Adams State may not be as legitimate or could be difficult to work with, because I've done some research and I have found that Adams State has one person overseeing the whole program, and that's hard, communication. So those are my two questions, because I don't want him to spend the next 4 years of his life getting a degree in something that will not benefit him in the long run. And there's nobody, particularly in the educational department at Danbury Federal Prison, who can take on being an advisor about this. So again, this is to the room. I wasn't thinking we were going to be as far ahead into law degrees in this discussion, but to be honest with you, I'm basically into the idea of how does one become educated while incarcerated?
well, obviously it depends on the offerings at the federal prison, and now they can get, people who are incarcerated can get Pell Grants, so they are expanding the offerings. But I know that in New York, people who have studied social work have had a lot of success, because in New York, even if you can't become a licensed clinical social worker necessarily, being directly impacted is actually considered helpful. So you can work in reentry services if you are on the registry, and they're very open to that. And I would assume that would be similar in other states. And Zach also mentioned trade school might be a good idea to get some kind of a skill, even if you can't get formally licensed.
Even with those trade schools, you gotta make sure
Yeah.
you got clearance going to people's houses.
Right.
Yeah.
His interest area is actually, he's a mentor in prison now, and he really wants to return to helping people who have been incarcerated. doing social service, and I actually talked him away from it, thinking he would not be able to get licensed.
Yes.
So he wants to go now, the next step,
They have-
sociology.
Since I came from that area recently.
sociology.
They have programs actually where you can develop a mentorship in the prison
That's
system.
what he's
I'm
doing.
not sure in the federal, but there are connections to that, because if he's as an educator I was, and don't have him be a teacher though, because you can't be a teacher and be on the registry. You talked about
Yeah.
that, but I would,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so,
Now we're gonna go to
I was saying, don't plan on being a teacher, because that's something he can't do, but I would recommend him doing something that he enjoys doing. And a lot of the systems, prison systems, have mentorship programs where you can get certifications and so forth. They do in California, or connection to that, because an interest area, like I'm interested in the legal profession, which I never was before, and the prison had me interested in that. That makes me move forward even more, so.
okay, so we'll take a,
Were you guys ever worried about verbal or physical threats when attending, college in person? And I was wondering how Zach coped with the negative college news articles. Did you try to correct the record? Did you just ignore it? How did you deal with all that stress and negativity? Thanks.
Sure. So I will say, I don't know if other people have had different experiences. I didn't experience any verbal or physical threats even after these articles came out. And in fact, I had a pretty good group of friends, and after the first one came out, they threw a surprise party is a weird way to put it, but it was like we support you. So it was really nice. And just to be clear, this was the undergraduates, editorial desk that put this out. So to whatever extent the undergraduate college felt differently than the law school one, I don't know. And from I will say, like I mentioned, it caused a schism in the law school with some of the faculty and administration. But to their credit, the dean basically came out and said, this isn't appropriate. Zach got this on his own merit, et cetera, and so forth. Even though I know that she personally was one of the people that was basically like, why did we let this guy in? Because she, just as it happened to turn out, I was admitted by an interim dean of admissions, or by an interim dean of the law school, and then she got hired, and then I was there on her first day of school, and she was like, "What is this guy doing here?" But yeah, to her credit, I mean, she stood up for me, and I'm very thankful for that. So I don't have any further sort of stories of woe about it. It was, I think maybe I was in a very unique and lucky position, but I always put myself out there as a very trustworthy and good guy. I never had any issues at the law school. And I think sort of returning to that point of avoid all appearances of impropriety. If I had been sort of on the cusp where people were suspicious of me or something like that, I think those conversations could have gone very differently.
and it is illegal on any college campus to verbally or physically threaten anyone, so you would, I was just gonna say, on any college campus, any kind of verbal threats or physical abuse, that's illegal. That's actually why the Clary Act was started, so that you would have grounds to have a complaint. So I don't know of any cases of people on the registry who have attended college who are threatened by other students in physical or dangerous ways beyond, rumor and innuendo.
If I may just follow up on the education concept just for 1 minute. Education is wonderful. I have a philosophy degree, great tool. Go try to find a job with that. But, I had a conviction 40 plus years ago, so I kind of predate the registry idea. Never got on the registry, managed to keep myself off when they started playing that game. But one of the things I figured out for myself is if I really wanted job, work for myself. And I'm not downplaying education. Education is wonderful. And in my job, I have to self-educate constantly. But in fact, education is not necessarily the only tool or the only opportunity. You can go work for yourself. I'm going to cite an example. One of our affiliate leaders from Delaware, her son ended up on the registry. He ended up becoming a plumber, working for himself, created his own company, got married a couple of weeks ago in Delaware. Attending his wedding, the lieutenant governor of the state of Delaware, who happens to be running for governor, sat with that affiliate's director at the dinner because he did work for that family and they like him. Yeah.
My bad. Some guidance. Back in COVID, my son was visited by a gentleman for the FBI. The day he finished his finals for his senior year, now he had to come back, and we went back to the University of Miami. And anything that was involved with what happened was non-contact. It was online, and it never took place at the University of Miami. When he approached his professors, they agreed to let him finish out and graduate. He did. The day after he graduated, he basically got his degree in the mail. He got everything, and then the FBI picked him up again, and that was 3 years ago. In the meantime, we contacted University of Miami, talked to the dean who was responsible. He was drinking gimlets in the Bahamas the day I talked to him on the phone, and said, well, where do we go? And he says, well, he didn't get to his probationary hearing. And I said, it's going to be tough to do for at least 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. And he said, basically, he didn't care. Do you have any ideas how we can pursue this legally? I mean, he's got everything, but they will not release his transcript.
I think this is a little beyond the scope of what we can handle, and I apologize, but
See, I know, okay, but I'm looking for a way to deal with this. Do you have anything in mind besides the guy?
No, why don't we talk about afterwards? That way we can handle that.
Okay, thank you.
And do you have a question? Okay, and then that'll be.
Yeah, I want to offer from a technology point of view that it is an incredibly high demand. There are millions of jobs in the United States that are unfilled by people qualified to do like IT security and things of that nature. And much of it can be done remotely, or you can be fronted behind a consulting agency where you're not employed at the place, you're employed with the consulting firm. Bureau of Labor statistics, top 20 jobs, half of them range either between medical and IT stuff. That would be my suggestion. Obviously, I'm biased. That's what I do. So that's just my 2 cents.
Coding, I think, would be an absolutely great field to go in. No license required. I think to what extent you can do it in the prison, I don't know, but
Hard.
Yeah.
but you can certainly read about it.
You can. And I mean, that's what I did. I did 6 years, and I was constantly studying computer magazines, everything. I had books sent in, and I know that not everybody's situation is the same of getting materials. That's the path that I chose while I was down for 6 years. I played a lot of chess. I never played dominoes. I never played spades. I focused on reinventing me so that when I got out, I had smooth sailings as much as possible.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, we'll do one last one. Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to kind of comment. I was a little apprehensive about standing up and speaking. My name's Mike, and I've been out of prison for 6 months. I was incarcerated in the state of Georgia. And to ask this one young lady who was speaking about education, I know in the state of Georgia and some federal prisons that inmates have tablets. And so, you know what I'm saying, they have access to actually use those tablets to be able to learn educational things on it. And in some prison systems, of course, they're what we call jailbroke, because we do have smart guys in there that have went the IT route and have taught themselves how to write software. And so, you know, that's how they've become more abreast of learning and putting things together. And so they use Ashland University inside the state of Georgia system, and they have degrees in business and they have degrees in theology. And so I didn't know if Ashland University would be something that, you know, your nephew or your sons could look into, but Ashland University is what they use in the state of Georgia system. And you're able to get degrees in theology, like I said, bachelor's and associates in theology. I think theology. Oh, what's that? Back on. So I haven't heard anyone, you know, speak about theology, and it kind of goes, you know, to run the gamut because, you know, you always got the Bible. You got the Bible at hand, and so a lot of people use that platform in order, and it helps you in the long run. So if you're sincere and, you know, you put forth, you know, praying and, you know, and working for God, then I think a lot of things can come forth from it. But, you know, I've seen a lot of, currently with job situation, this young man asked a question in reference to, you know, like negative stigmas and, you know, being verbally and physically threatened or abused. And, you know, I've experienced that kind of recently in the job market. And I was just working in the manufacturing area. I was like, man, you know, you come in and you work hard and break your back for a company and you're still stigmatized. And, you know, I was blocked from a position. I didn't really even want to go out for a position, but I went out for the position. And I was denied the position. Like, you know, the young man would say, you pull up for the first job. It was like a Monday morning. I was supposed to go in and you know, and get a nice little job doing administrative inventory control. You know, nothing that I needed a degree for, you know, to do or anything like that. And that Monday morning, you know, I found out that they decided to hold back on the position. And, you know, I already knew at that point, you know, because the companies they're kind of held at bay because it's a legal issue. You know, it's a legal issue that, you know, if anybody with the right, you know, just a little bit of education or good sense, you know that you can present, you know, stuff like this to the EEOC, you know, and they'll kind of back you with it. But I just wanted to, you know, let you know that those things do happen. And like you, Dr. Horowitz, you spoke about in the innuendo part and in reference, but people do talk, people do Google, and so, you know, it's a hard thing to keep yourself together sometimes because, you know, you have a job to do and you're just trying to put your best foot forward and be the best you can be. And so I just wanted to pass out that information and you know, and try to let this young man know that those things are prevalent and you just have to be strong. You have to tie in and, you know, all you people that are here that aren't affected directly, like you know, you aren't the person that's incarcerated, it shows a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for being here.